Hello, 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 hello. Today I'm going to be doing another reading video, but I have something different in addition. This fluffy mic cover and the fact that it's white reminds me of my bunny so much. Because she was white, and this is really how her fur felt. It was very soft. Very soft. And it kind of makes me miss her because, oh my gosh, it feels like petting my little bunny. But we are going to be reading more of my book today. The Awakening. I think I've read to like chapter 8, so it might be like a little confusing. Not really, they haven't really furthered the plot in any way, shape, or form. Like, I don't know, it's just them living their life still, and I'm just like, but so far, this book is not that good, in my opinion. Like, to want to keep reading, I'm like, I don't care at all, about any of this stuff. So, alright, I guess we'll get into it. Okay, we're on, like, chapter 7. Mrs. B was not a woman given to confidences, a characteristic hitherto contrary to her nature. Hitherto, is that how you pronounce that? Contrary to her nature. Even as a child, she had lived her own small life all within herself. At a very early period, she had apprehended instinctively the dual life, the outward existence which conforms, the inward life which questions. That summer at Grand Isle, she began to loosen a little of the mantle of reserve that had always enveloped her. There must have been influences, both subtle and apparent, working in their several ways to induce her to do this. But the most obvious was the influence of Adele Madame R. Adele R. The excessive physical charm of the Creole that had first attracted her, for Edna had a sensuous susceptibility to beauty. Then the candor of the woman's whole existence, which everyone might read, and which formed a striking contrast to her own habitual reserve. This might have furnished a link. Who can tell what metals the gods use in forging the subtle bond which we call sympathy, which we might as well call love. The two women went away one morning to the beach together, arm in arm, under the huge white sunshade, and had prevailed upon Madame R. to leave the children behind, though she could not induce her to relinquish a diminutive roll of needlework, which Adele begged to be allowed to slip into the depths of her pocket. In some unaccountable way, they had escaped from Robert. I think Robert is the love interest, is what I'm devising so far. In the last chapter, Madame B, or Mrs. B, was painting something, and Robert came over and laid his head on her arm. Oh my god, that's crazy. So, I'm not wearing my retainers tonight, so naughty. I can't be bothered to go making them. There we go. Oh, what? Okay. The walk to the beach was no inconsiderable one, considering consisting as it did of a long sandy path upon which a sporadic and tangled growth that bordered on it on either side made frequent and unexpected inroads. There were acres of yellow chamomile reaching out on either hand. Further away still, vegetable gardens abounded with frequent small plantations of orange or lemon trees intervening. The dark green clusters glistened from afar in the sun. The women were both of goodly height, Madame R possessing the more feminine and matronly figure. The charm of Edna B's physique stole insensibly upon you. The lines of her body were long, clean, and symmetrical. It was a body which occasionally fell into splendid poses. There were no suggestion of the trim, stereotype fashion plate about it. A casual and indiscriminating observer in passing might not cast a second glance upon the figure, but with more feeling and discernment he would have recognized the noble beauty of its modeling and the graceful severity of poise and movement, which made Edna B. different from the crowd. She wore a cool muslin that morning, white with a waving vertical line of brown running through it, also a white linen collar and a big straw hat, which she had taken down from the peg outside the door. The hat rested anyway on her yellow-brown hair that waved a little, was heavy and clung close to her head. Madame R, more careful of her complexion, had twined a gauze veil above her head. She wore dogskin gloves with gauntlets that protected her wrists. She was dressed in pure white, with a fluffiness of ruffles that became her. The draperies and fluttering things which she wore suited her rich, luxuriant beauty, as a greater severity of line could not have done. There were a number of bathhouses among the beach, of rough but solid construction, built with a small protecting galleries facing the water. Each house consisted of 2 compartments, and each family at Lebrun's possessed a compartment for itself, fitted out with the essentials, paraphernalia of the bath, and whatever other conveniences the owner might desire. The 2 women had no intention of bathing. They had just strolled down to the beach for a walk and to be alone and near the water. The B and R compartments adjoined one another under the same roof. Mrs. B had brought down her key through force of habit. Unlocking the door to her bathroom, she went inside and soon emerged, bringing a rug, which she spread upon the floor of the gallery, and 2 huge hair pillows covered with crash, which is coarse linen fabric, which she placed against the front of the building. The 2 seated themselves there in the shade of the porch, side by side, with their backs against the pillows and their feet extended. Madame R removed her veil, wiped her face with a rather delicate handkerchief, and fanned herself with a fan which she had always carried suspended somewhere about her person, with a long narrow ribbon. Edna removed her collar and opened the dress at the throat. She took the fan from Madame R and began to fan both herself and her companion. It was very warm, and for a while they did nothing but exchange remarks about the heat, the sun's glare, but there was a breeze blowing, a choppy, stiff wind that whipped the water, and it fluttered the skirts of the 2 women, and kept them for a while engaged in adjusting, readjusting, tucking in, securing hairpins and hatpins. A few persons were sporting some distance away in the water. The beach was very still of human sound that hour. The lady in black was reading her morning devotions on the porch of a neighboring bathhouse. 2 young lovers were exchanging their hearts' yearnings beneath the children's tent, which they had found unoccupied. Edna B, casting her eyes about, had finally kept them at rest upon the sea. The day was clear and carried the gaze out as far as the blue sky went. There were a few white clouds suspended highly over the horizon. A lateen sail, a triangular sail, was visible in the direction of Cat Island, a peninsula near which the Mississippi River empties into the Gulf of Mexico. was motionless in a far distance. Of what are you thinking? Asked Adele and her companion, whose countenance she had been watching with a little amused attention, arrested by the absorbed expression which seemed to have seized and fixed every feature into a statuesque repose. Nothing, returned Mrs. B. with a start, adding at once, how stupid, but it seems to me it is the reply we make instinctively to such a question. Let me see, she went on, throwing back her head and narrowing her eyes till they shone like two vivid points of light. Let me see, I was really not conscious of thinking of anything. Perhaps I can retrace my thoughts. Oh, never mind, laughed Madame R. I am not quite so exacting. I will let you off this time. It really is too hot to mind, especially to think about thinking. But for the fun of it, persisted Edna, first of all at the sight of the water stretching so far away, those motionless sails against the blue sky made a delicious picture that I just wanted to sit and look at. The hot wind beating in my face made me think, without any connection that I can trace, of a summer day in Kentucky, of a meadow that seemed as big as the ocean to the very little girl walking through the grass, which was higher than her waist. She threw her arms as if swimming when she walked, beating the tall grass as one strikes out in the water. Oh, I see the connection now. Where were you going that day in Kentucky, walking through the grass? I don't remember now. I was just walking diagonally across a big field. My sunbonnet obstructed the view. I could only see the stretch of green before me, and I felt as if I must walk on forever, without coming to the end of it. I don't remember whether I was frightened or pleased. I must have been entertained. Likely as not, it was Sunday. She laughed, and I was running away from prayers from the Presbyterian service, read in a spirit of gloom by my father that chills me yet to even think of. And have you been running away from prayers ever since, ma chérie, my dear, in French? Asked Madame R., amused. No, oh no, Edna hastened to say. I was a little unthinking child in those days, just following a misleading impulse without question. On the contrary, during one period of my life, religion took a firm hold upon me, and after I was 12, and until why, I suppose, until now. Though I never thought much of it, just driven along by habit. But do you know, she broke off, turning her quick eyes upon Madame R. and leaning forward a little so as to bring her face quite close to that of her companion. Sometimes I feel the summer as if I were walking through the green meadow again, idly, aimlessly, unthinking and unguided. Madame R. laid her hand over that of Mrs. B., which was near her. Seeing that the hand was not withdrawn, she clasped it firmly and warmly. She even stroked it a little fondly with the other hand, murmuring in an undertone, "Pauvre chérie." The action was at first a little confusing to Edna, but she soon lent herself readily to the Creole's gentle caress. She was not accustomed to an outward and spoken expression of affection, either in herself or in others. She and her younger sister Janet had quarreled a good deal through a force of unfortunate habit. Her older sister Margaret was matronly and dignified, probably from having assumed matronly and housewifely responsibilities too early in life, their mother having died when they were quite young. Margaret was not effusive, she was practical. Edna had an occasional girlfriend, but whether accidentally or not, they seemed to have all been of one type, the self-contained. She never realized that the reserve of her own character had much, perhaps everything, to do with this. Her most intimate friend at school had been one of rather exceptional intellectual gifts and wrote fine-sounding essays, which Edna admired and strove to imitate. And with her she talked and glowed over the English classics and sometimes held religious and political controversies. Edna often wondered as one propensity which sometimes had inwardly disturbed her, without causing an outward show or manifestation on her part. At a very early age, sometimes it was when she the ocean of waving grass. She remembered that she had been passionately enamored of a dignified and sad-eyed cavalry officer who visited her father in Kentucky. She could not leave his presence when he was there, nor remove her eyes from his face, which was something like Napoleon's, with a lock of black hair falling across the forehead. But the cavalry officer melted imperceptibly out of her existence. This chapter is long. And at another time, her affections were deeply engaged by a young gentleman who visited a lady on a neighboring plantation. It was after they went to Mississippi to live. The young man was engaged to be married to the young lady, but they sometimes called upon Margaret, driving over on afternoons in a buggy. Edna was a little miss, just merging into her teens, and the realization that she herself was nothing to the engaged young man was a bitter affliction to her. But he, too, went the way of dreams. She was a grown young woman when she was overtaken by what she supposed to be the climax of her fate. It was when the face and figure of a great tragedian began to haunt her imagination and stir her senses. The persistence of the infatuation lent it an aspect of genuineness, the hopelessness of it all colored with the lofty tones of great passion. The picture of the tragedian, is that how you say it? Tragedian. It's definitely not that. It stood and framed upon her desk. Anyone may possess the portrait of a tragedian. Why is this word coming up so many times? This was a sinister reflection which she cherished. In the presence of others, she expressed admiration for his exalted gifts as she handled the photograph around it, dwelt upon the fidelity of the likeness. When alone, she sometimes picked it up and kissed the gold glass passionately. What? She's kissing a picture. Okay. Bro, okay, what? That's such a weird thing to add. Her marriage to Leonce P. was surely an accident. Leonce Pontellier. In this respect, resembling many other marriages which masquerade as the degrees of fate. It was in the midst of her secret great passion that she met him. He fell in love, as men are in the habit of doing, and pressed the suit with an earnestness and an ardor which left nothing to be desired. He pleased her. His absolute devotion flattered her. She fancied there was a sympathy, a thought, and taste between them, in which fancy she was mistaken. Add to this violent opposition of her father and her sister Margaret to her marriage with the Catholic, and we need seek no further for the motives which led her to accept Monsieur P. for her husband. The acme of bliss, which would have been a marriage with the tragedian, was not for her in this world, as the devoted wife of a man who worshipped her. She felt she would take her place with a certain dignity in the world of reality, closing the portals forever behind her upon the realm of romance and dreams. But it was not long before the tragedian had gone to join the cavalry officer and the engaged young man and a few others. And Edna found herself face to face with the realities. She grew fond of her husband, realizing with some unaccountable satisfaction that no trace of passion or excessive and fictitious warmth colored her affection, thereby threatening its dissolution. She was fond of her father in an uneven, impulsive way. She would sometimes gather them passionately to her heart. She would sometimes forget them. The year before they had spent part of the summer with her grandmother P. in Iberville, which is either a parish near Baton Rouge at the border between Louisiana or a village with the same name. Feeling secure regarding their happiness and welfare, she did not miss them except with an occasional intense longing. Their absence was a of relief, though she did not admit this even to herself. It seemed to free her of responsibility which she had blindly assumed and for which fate had not fitted her. And it did not reveal so much as all this to Madame R. That summer day, when they sat with faces turned to the sea, but a good part of it escaped her. She had put her head down on Madame R's shoulder. She was flushed and felt intoxicated with the sound of her own voice and the unaccustomed taste of candor. It muddled her like wine or like a first breath of freedom. There was the sound of approaching voices. It was Robert surrounded by a troop of children searching for them. The two little bees were with them, and he carried Madame R's little girl in his arms. There were other children beside, and two nursemaids followed, looking disagreeable and resigned. The women at once rose and began to shake out their draperies and relax their muscles. Mrs. B threw the cushions and rug into the bathhouse. The children all scampered off to the awning, and they stood there in a line, gazing upon the intruding lovers, still exchanging their vows and sighs. The lovers got up with only a silent protest, and walked away somewhere else. The children possessed themselves of the tent, and Mrs. B went over to join them. Madame R begged Robert to accompany her to the house. She complained of cramp in her limbs and stiffness at the joints. She leaned draggingly upon his arm as they walked. Okay, that's the end of chapter 7. Chapter 8 is next, but I think that I'll save that for next time, or just a later. Alright, so that was part of The Awakening by Gage. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get through the whole book, like, just because of copyright and whatnot, but I will try, and I kind of have to just to keep me motivated. But yeah, so I will see you next time, and I hope you enjoyed this video.